Leo was exhausted from working his summer job at the factory when his phone suddenly buzzed in the darkness. The dormitory manager had just sent a chilling message into the building's group chat. The factory is conducting a surprise inspection. Everyone in the dorms must open their doors immediately. Anyone who refuses will have half a month's wages deducted. Before Leo could even process the demand, a private message popped up from a student in room 302, Mark. Don't trust him. He isn't the dorm manager at all. Leo stared at the glowing screen, a deep sense of confusion washing over him. Mark had explicitly used the male pronoun for the manager, but Leo vividly remembered that the dorm manager was a 50-year-old woman. He had just seen the auntie sitting in the lobby that very afternoon when he moved in. He was absolutely certain the manager was female. Leo's fingers trembled slightly as he typed back, asking if Mark meant the person in the chat was an imposter. Mark's reply sent a spike of pure dread through Leo's chest. The man messaging them was a murderer. Leo desperately asked who the killer was and how Mark could possibly know this. Don't worry about how I know. Just hide. Do not open the door under any circumstances. When Leo frantically asked if Mark had called the police, Mark claimed he had, and that the cops were already on their way. The web of lies. The thick, suffocating darkness of the room made Leo feel incredibly vulnerable, and he found it hard to blindly trust Mark's warning. Seeking a second opinion, he messaged Toby, a student living down on the first floor in room 126. Leo asked Toby if he was in his room and mentioned the manager's sudden order to open their doors for an inspection. Toby quickly replied that he was in his room, his door was already wide open, and he urged Leo to do the same to avoid losing half a month's pay. Eager to avoid the penalty, Leo slid out of bed and prepared to open his door. Then, he hesitated, remembering Mark's terrifying warning. Leo typed out a quick message to Toby, explaining that a guy from room 302 claimed there was a killer in the building and had warned everyone to stay locked inside. Toby brushed it off, saying Mark had messaged him too, but he didn't believe a word of it. Toby then asked for Leo's room number, offering to tell the manager that Leo was safely registered so he wouldn't get in trouble. Leo was just about to type his room number when a cold, paralyzing realization struck him. Toby had also used the male pronoun to refer to the dorm manager. There was only one horrifying explanation. The person holding Toby's phone was lying. Toby was likely already dead, and the serial killer was using his phone to bait the remaining students. Panic clawed at Leo's throat. He immediately dialed his boss, Mr. Henderson, begging to process his resignation so he could go home. Mr. Henderson coldly refused, complaining that the resignation process was too much of a hassle. The boss dismissively added that he was far too busy looking for a renovation company for his house to deal with Leo's paperwork. Desperate to keep the man on the phone, Leo babbled about using an online platform like Tubatu, pleading that they offered free quotes, verified contractors, and safe payment upon inspection. Irritated, Mr. Henderson told Leo they would discuss his resignation later and abruptly hung up the phone. Right at that moment, another message from the manager pinged in the group chat. I am starting the inspection now. Open your doors. If you miss the inspection, you will lose half a month's pay. Sitting in the gloom of his room, Leo felt paralyzed by indecision. He analyzed the fragmented conversations. Mark had been the first to message him. How did he know there was a killer? And why was this maniac hunting them? Before Leo could type out his questions, Mark sent another update. Mark explained that he had privately messaged the two students on the first floor, but the guy in 126 had accused him of fear-mongering. Mark warned that the inspection had officially started. 126 was probably already dead, and the killer was making his way up from the ground floor. Mark pleaded with Leo to hide. The pieces fell into place, confirming Leo's absolute worst fear. Toby from room 126 was dead, and the killer was now using his phone. If Leo hadn't listened to Mark and fled, he would be a dead man. Remembering a micro camera he had purchased the day before to deter thieves, Leo quickly enacted a desperate plan. He tucked the tiny camera under a towel, pointing the lens directly at his bed, and connected the live feed to his spare phone. Moving with silent, frantic urgency, Leo slipped out of his window in room 421. He carefully jumped over to the neighboring balcony of 422. Terrified the killer would easily track him down, he pushed forward, scaling the exterior walls until he reached the distant, empty room of 428. Once hidden in the shadows of 428, Leo pulled out his phone and sent a blatant lie to Toby's compromised device. I just went to the bathroom. I'm staying in room 421. Please tell the manager for me. That lunatic in 302 is spreading rumors, and I almost believed him. Thanks for saving my salary, brother. Shortly after, Mark forwarded a terrifying video to Leo. The footage showed a man wearing a baseball cap, his face heavily concealed by a tight mask. The intruder gripped a short, jagged knife. Moving with mechanical, chilling precision, the killer stepped into a dorm room and viciously plunged the blade into the bedsheets over and over again. Leo's blood ran cold. He now believed everything Mark had said. Why was he pulled into this nightmare? Was this killer simply a maniac seeking indiscriminate revenge against society? After 30 agonizing seconds, the killer realized the bed was empty. Mark then forwarded Leo a chilling screenshot of a message he had just received from Toby's phone. "Aren't you from room 302? Hiding is useless. I will definitely find you." This cemented Leo's belief that Toby's phone was in the hands of the murderer. Was Toby the killer himself, or was the killer just using his device? Mark quickly messaged again, stating the killer was already on the 3rd floor and would be heading up soon. Mark suggested that since there were only 4 survivors left, they needed to band together. Mark created a new group chat, pulling in Leo, Julian from room 505, and Silas from room 536. Mark immediately uploaded the horrific stabbing video for the group to see. Julian was the first to react, claiming the knife-wielding maniac in the video was the dorm manager. Leo was stunned. He was absolutely certain the manager was a woman, yet Julian vehemently insisted a male manager had checked him in that very day. Because all the students had just moved into the building that afternoon, the conflicting stories created a toxic cloud of paranoia. Leo suddenly felt as though he were trapped in a twisted, real-life game of mafia, and the wolf was hiding right beside him. Refusing to put his life in the hands of strangers, Leo decided he had to save himself. Mark was highly suspicious. How had he known about the killer so early, and how could he accurately warn everyone? Leo quietly dialed the emergency police number, lowering his voice to a terrified whisper as he reported his exact location. The dispatcher assured him they were sending units and told him to protect himself. A wave of temporary relief washed over Leo, but it was shattered the moment he glanced at his phone screen. The live feed from his hidden camera showed the door to room 421 creaking open. A dark silhouette slipped inside. The figure's clothing matched the masked man in Mark's video perfectly. The killer marched to Leo's bed and began violently stabbing the mattress, oblivious to the fact that his prey had escaped. Through the feed, Leo watched the masked man realize the bed was empty. The killer pulled out a phone and made a call. 421 ran away. The man growled. As soon as the killer hung up, the door to 421 opened again, and a second figure stepped into the frame. He ran? "This kid is playing with me. He can't leave this building," the second man snarled. Leo slapped both hands over his mouth to muffle a scream. The second man in his room was Toby from room 126. Trust no one. Toby was standing side by side with the armed murderer. Was Toby part of a killing syndicate? Leo's mind spun out of control. He forced himself to take deep breaths and analyze the impossible situation. Mark had warned everyone far too early. Toby had played the skeptic but was clearly an accomplice. Julian and Silas seemed like innocent victims dragged into the mess, just like Leo. But why did Julian insist the manager was a man when Leo had seen an auntie in the lobby? Deciding to test the group, Leo saved the video feed of the 2 men in his room and uploaded it to the survivor chat. "Where the hell did you hide your phone?" Julian immediately demanded. "Why do you care where it's hidden? Are you the killer?" Leo fired back. Both Julian and Silas piled on, arguing that hiding a secret camera was incredibly suspicious. "Are you working with them?" they accused. Leo defended himself, pointing out that if he were part of the murder squad, he wouldn't have warned them to hide. He would have just asked for their room numbers to hunt them down. Silas then interrogated Mark, asking how he could possibly know about a serial killer in the building. Mark quickly typed out a plausible excuse. He had been sneaking out of a first-floor window to go to an internet cafe when he accidentally witnessed the killer murder the dorm manager. Startled, Mark had made a noise, drawing the killer's attention. Terrified, he ran back inside, found a broken dorm room to hide in, and mass-messaged everyone to save their lives. Before Leo could process Mark's story, Julian sent him a private message. "Don't trust him. I firmly believe the male manager is the killer." Julian theorized that Mark was playing a classic undercover tactic, dropping breadcrumbs of truth to gain their absolute trust before leading them into a slaughter. Julian warned that Mark's plea for them to unite was a trap to lure them out. Leo argued again about seeing a female manager, but Julian swore he had personally handed a cigarette to an old man sitting in the manager's booth. Julian also pointed out that Silas was acting incredibly suspicious by staying so quiet in the chat. A normal person would be having a nervous breakdown. Just as Leo began to align his suspicions with Julian, Silas sent him a private message. "Don't trust them. Mark and Julian are both accomplices." Silas revealed that he, 2. Had seen a female manager when he moved in. According to Silas, this meant Julian was lying to cover for the killer. Silas explained he had stayed quiet intentionally to observe everyone's behavior, knowing accomplices were hiding in the chat. To prove his point, Silas sent Leo 2 photos side by side, a screenshot of the killer from Mark's video, and a screenshot of the killer from Leo's hidden camera. Silas urged Leo to look closely, pointing out that the heights were drastically different. Zooming in frame by frame, Leo noticed the man in Mark's video had a small black mole on his face, while the killer in his own room had smooth skin. Were there 2 different killers hunting them tonight? The master plan. Trembling, Leo tried to call the police again, but his phone displayed no signal. Silas confirmed that the killers had likely jammed their cellular signals. They could only communicate on the building's internal Wi-Fi. Trapped and desperate, Silas suggested they try to sneak out of the building together. Suspicious that Silas might be setting a trap, Leo lied and said he was trapped on the 5th floor. Silas agreed to try and escape first, promising to bring the police back for Leo. Staring at the zoomed-in photos of the killers, a horrifying truth finally dawned on Leo. The killer in room 421 wasn't a man at all. It was a woman. There weren't 2 rival gangs of killers. It was the dorm managers. The older man and the older woman were a married couple orchestrating this entire massacre. Suddenly, Mark announced in the group chat that he had successfully called the police, the killers were subdued, and it was safe to come out. Leo knew this was a blatant lie. There was no physical way Mark could have recorded that initial video on the 1st floor, run up to the 3rd floor, hidden a camera, and escaped the room in mere seconds. Mark's footage had been entirely staged. Mark was one of the wolves. Julian messaged Leo, eager to leave his hiding spot. Leo pleaded with him to stay hidden, warning him it was a trap. But Julian complained that hiding in a closet was too suffocating and ignored him. Silas typed furiously in the group chat, exposing Mark's lie. "Don't go out. It's a trap. The signals are jammed. You couldn't have called the police." His cover blown, Mark finally dropped the act. "Stop hiding and come out. You'll be found eventually. Stop your dying struggles." Leo begged for his life in the chat, screaming that he had done nothing wrong and offering them all the money his family had. "I don't give a damn about your filthy money. I want your dog life," the killer spat back. The horrifying reality set in. Julian was the actual target of this elaborate hunt. Leo angrily demanded Julian confess what he had done to drag them all into this nightmare. Cornered and terrified, Julian finally confessed his sins to the group. He admitted he was a wealthy, arrogant student who had preyed on girls. After being rejected by a pure, innocent girl outside the library, his wounded pride turned into malice. One rainy night, he ambushed her, knocked her unconscious, and dragged her into the woods. The trauma was so immense that the girl threw herself off a building the very next day. Silas cursed Julian in the chat, calling him an animal who deserved to be butchered. Leo finally understood the entire gruesome puzzle. The killers weren't random psychopaths. They were the grieving family of the girl Julian had destroyed. Julian begged for mercy, flooding the chat with apologies, but soon his messages stopped. Mark coldly announced to the group that the evil had been eradicated, Julian was dead, and the remaining survivors were free to leave their rooms. The final judgment, unsure if it was safe, Leo waited in the crushing silence. A few minutes later, Silas sent him a video of an empty, quiet hallway. "It's safe, brother. They are gone. Come out." Silas's voice echoed through the speaker. Taking a shaky breath, Leo reached out and slowly opened the door to room 428. He found himself standing face to face with a masked killer holding a blood-stained knife. "Found you," the figure whispered. When Leo finally regained consciousness, the agonizing bite of thick rope dug into his wrists and ankles. He was bound tightly and dumped on the floor next to another tied-up captive. It was Julian. Standing over them were the 3 architects of the night's horrors. They slowly peeled off their hats and masks. The female killer was Mrs. Gable, the dorm manager Leo had seen. The male killer was Mr. Gable, the manager Julian had met. And the third killer, holding Julian's phone, was Silas. Silas wasn't just a random student in room 536. He was Toby from room 126, and more importantly, he was the dead girl's brother. The girl's name was Lily. Mr. Gable viciously kicked the screaming Julian in the ribs. "You piece of trash! Letting you live this long was a mercy," the grieving father roared, swearing his family would never forgive him for what he did to Lily. Silas handed his father the short knife, suggesting they sever Julian's manhood so he could never hurt another woman. Julian wailed, begging for his miserable life and promising to pray for Lily every day. His pleas fell on deaf ears. The father brought the blade down, and a sickening shriek of absolute agony tore through the room. Leo squeezed his eyes shut, unable to witness the bloody butchery unfolding beside him. Mrs. Gable walked over to Leo, her eyes hollow and filled with venom, and shoved her phone in his face. She showed him the chat logs, revealing how Silas had masterfully played the role of a terrified student to keep Leo from escaping. "Why drag me into this?" Leo sobbed, desperate and terrified. "I didn't assault your daughter. I don't even know who she is." Mrs. Gable spat on him. "You didn't assault her, but you are just as much a piece of scum," she hissed. Her words yanked Leo's memory back to a rainy night months ago. He had been walking past the dark woods near the library. He vividly remembered hearing the muffled, desperate screams of a woman being attacked. He had seen two shadows struggling in the brush. But because he was deeply apathetic and selfish, he hadn't called the police. He had simply put his head down and walked away. Silas grabbed the heavy ropes binding Leo and dragged him toward the open window. "Julian is a monster, but your cold-blooded apathy makes you unforgivable," Silas growled. "Die for Lily." As the faint wail of police sirens finally pierced the night air, Silas hoisted both Leo and the bleeding Julian over the ledge and threw them out of the fourth-floor window. Leo opened his eyes to the harsh, sterile lights of a hospital room. A police officer stood by his bed, explaining the grim aftermath. The police had rushed to the scene after Leo's initial phone call. They arrived just in time to see Silas throw him from the window. Miraculously, the ropes binding Leo had snagged on a thick tree branch, saving his life, though he had suffered multiple severe fractures. Julian hadn't been as lucky. He was currently fighting for his life in the ICU. The Gable family had been arrested and freely confessed to their intricate plot of revenge. After Leo recounted the entire horrifying night to the detectives, the police launched a full investigation into Julian's past. The wealthy predator was eventually dragged from his hospital bed to a courtroom, where he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the destruction of Lily's life.